They're literally prosecuting the former president over sex?
If you believe in our system and you want it to continue, you have to raise your hand and say stop, because this is too great an assault on our system, much greater than anything we saw on January 6th, that's for certain.
This is a shameful day in the history of the country.
So it's not just the anchors over at Fox News having a meltdown as they grapple with the reality that their Republican standard bearer has been indicted for his alleged dealings with a porn star. Republican lawmakers have taken to social media to express their outrage at the, quote, abuse of power, notably absent an acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, there's something more to this and Teflon Don is not above the law. Back with me this morning is former Maryland Congresswoman and MSNBC political analyst Donna Edwards. And joining the conversation is Denver Riggleman, former Virginia congressman and the author of The Breach, The Untold Story of the Investigation into January 6th, and David Jolly, former Republican congressman from Florida and an MSNBC political analyst. My thanks to all of you. We'll talk about a power political panel this morning. Denver, I'd like to start with you. DA Alvin Bragg's office responded to top congressional Republicans, criticizing them for aiding Trump's efforts to vilify him and the judicial process. This, of course, follows 3 GOP House committee chairmen demanding confidential information in 2 different letters to DA Bragg. You are familiar with dangerous rhetoric, having served as an investigator for the 1-6 committee. So, Denver, how dangerous is it for these Republican congressmen to be basically saying, DA Alvin Bragg, you are complicit in this violation of Donald Trump's rights?
You know, hey, thanks for having me this morning, but I think it's always dehumanizing and demonizing, right, to go after these type of individuals with the language that they use. And that's part of the political playbook now. And I also am just sort of stunned by the situational morality, right, that's going on with some of the GOP. And I was one. And I just find it just, it's sort of a gobsmack that these individuals, you know, want to use the power of the federal government and their massive communication efforts in order to demonize a DA who had to present evidence in front of a grand jury, who then came back with an indictment. And Katie, I know you're an attorney, probably other attorneys on the panel. It's so good to be with, you know, former congressional representatives this morning. But for me, looking at it as a guy who's a counterterrorism analyst and looking at it as somebody who's not an attorney, but did this actually in the military intelligence field and actually had companies doing this, I just find it incredible looking at the Fox News clips that you just showed, identifying their language about how shameful it is. I just find it incredible that we're actually arguing about if this indictment is bad enough, if this was the lowest crime that a former president did who's actually running for president. And I'll end with this really quickly in this question. Unlike Harding, you know, who died, or unlike Nixon, who resigned, President Trump is actually running again. So when you look at these indictments, or you look at somebody who had these criminal acts, he's decided to jump back in the arena as a private citizen, maybe a former president, but as a private citizen. And those sins or those laws that he has broken should be visited upon him. He's running for the greatest office in the world.
You know, David, Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz in particular stands out to me always as one of Trump's most ardent supporters. Gaetz earlier this year narrowly avoided his own criminal indictment in a federal sex trafficking probe, but he's called on DeSantis to pledge to block any attempted extradition of Donald Trump from Florida to New York. And absurdly, even though he has no control over it, Ron DeSantis said yes. Why? Why the buy-in by Ron DeSantis at this stage? We already know Trump's lawyer Joe Tacopina says Trump's going to turn himself in on Tuesday. So why is DeSantis kissing the ring?
So a lot going on, Katie. First, I think we absolutely have to call out when Republicans are making these comments and Laura Ingraham and Fox hosts about these charges being baseless. Nobody knows what the charges are. Nobody does. And nobody knows what the evidence is. So they're speaking out of complete ignorance right now. What we are seeing is the Republican Party cross the fulcrum, if you will. They're starting to demonstrate the permanency of the rot within the Republican Party, that they will just undermine and kneecap law and order, that they will use Congress to interfere with the prosecution. These are dangerous, destabilizing themes. And so part of what you're seeing in DeSantis and Gaetz is just the new Republican Party. I think it's dangerous. We have to call it out. But what you're also seeing is the raw politics of Ron DeSantis. You know, someone pointed out something very smart, which was 10 days ago, I guess 2 weeks ago, when Donald Trump tweeted out he was going to be arrested. And then when he was actually indicted, the one person who flopped and became lampooned in both those news cycles was Ron DeSantis. The first time because he waited 48 hours to speak, and when he did, he was out of step with Republican orthodoxy, taking a swipe at the president. And the second time with this nonsense about not extraditing Donald Trump, something that he doesn't have the authority to resist, something that is not at issue because Donald Trump will surrender, and also something that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever under the rule of law. Ron DeSantis continues to play presidential politics poorly, but more importantly, the theme here is a Republican Party that truly is demonstrating a permanency of the rot within it.
Ron may be over the tips of his skis, huh? So, Donna, this seems like a big grifting money grab, in my opinion. Everybody seems to be fundraising over this indictment. Since the news of that indictment broke, Donald Trump himself has raised $4 million. What do you make of the fact that this type of cash flow is happening right now?
Well, you know, what happens on the political side is that Donald Trump has managed to consolidate both Republican donors and especially small donors out across the country, but he's also managed to consolidate his so-called opponents in support of him. And so no surprise that he's able to fundraise off it. The difference is that appearing in a courtroom before a judge where the judge gets to set all of the rules of the game is not the same thing as politics. And you know, at some point, those things are going to crash because the messages that Trump is sending out to his donors is going to be a very different posture than he will have to take in the courtroom. And so I'll be interested in seeing that. But I'm not surprised at all that, you know, he's raised millions of dollars off of this and will continue to do that. The problem is that that is not going to have any sway in a courtroom before a jury of your peers.
You know, but Denver, to Donna's point, though, according to a recent Quinnipiac poll, 75% of Republicans feel as though an indictment should not be disqualifying in regards to the upcoming 2024 election. What happened, Denver, to the party of law and order? What does it say, though, that you can run for president of the United States while being indicted for a felony, and even if you're convicted?
It almost seems like they've been desensitized to facts and what it means to be an American, you know, and listening to Donna, you know, when you're talking about the fundraising language, they bought into the hyperbole and outrage that's being fed to them every day. I mean, crazy is being mainstreamed into their frontal lobe. And a lot of the fundraising language is actually a radicalizing element to so many people. So when you're looking at individuals who say, hey, an indictment shouldn't matter to me if an individual runs for president, I have to say that where is our country right now? And that's the thing is me is serving in Congress. I have two other individuals with me today. We took the oath of office that, you know, we would preserve and defend the Constitution. And here we have almost an entire party or 3/4 of a party polled. You know, we don't know who was polled or how many were polled, but 3/4 of those individuals polled who said in the GOP said an indictment is okay, that you're okay to go behind an individual. And what do you pray for in church, right? Do you go in there and say, oh, you know, please protect a president who paid off a porn star and might be indicted for other things. But other than that, you know, hey, he's a dandy dude. And I'm just not quite sure if that's where we want to be as a country. And, you know, listening to David, I mean, David, I'm just shocked that you would say that politicians talk out of ignorance. Oh, my goodness. I mean, is that really what happens? But it is what happens. We have them everywhere right now. And I think that ignorance is really a wave. It's almost a metastasizing disease that sort of swept over a large portion of one political party.
Well, Denver, we could have a multi-hour special on the evangelical side of the GOP and what's going on with that. David, to you, Speaker Kevin McCarthy, very quiet, right? But also vowing to hold Bragg to account of all people. Yeah. Why does McCarthy think that Congress would ever have oversight power over a sovereign state like the Manhattan District Attorney?
I think Kevin McCarthy has demonstrated that he's willing to overlook the separation of powers, the role of the Congress. But more importantly, Katie, I think this is very important. We have to continue to frame this as Republicans meddling in a prosecution and interfering in it at the request of Donald Trump. Donald Trump a month ago asked Jim Jordan to interfere with the Bragg prosecution. That is a fundamental part of this entire case, and Kevin McCarthy and others should be held accountable for it. The problem, the opportunity missed for Republicans is this. The messaging should be simple. You can defend Donald Trump today. You can actually say this. Donald Trump is presumed innocent today. And I believe he is innocent. And I believe when he has an opportunity to respond to the allegations, he will be exonerated, and the American people will see that. That is a way Republicans can embrace the rule of law, can embrace law and order, and support their guy, Donald Trump. The problem is they've taken this blustery position of, go ahead, bring it on. Bring charges. Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. They're mistaking this bluster and strength. They're conflating it with what the American people actually see in them, which is surrender. And so I would say to Republicans today, with all this bluster, you go ahead and do it. Nominate your guy, Donald Trump, and see what happens.